Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin our first session of the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. But before that, we'd like to also convey a message to our participants and also delegates that will be joining us through virtual. You can please do summit, and we want you to participate and be active throughout our session. And for those delegates that is here in person, you may raise your hand if you have questions every session. And for those of you that is joining us through our live stream, you can note and you can input your question through our column chat, whichever platform that you are on right now. So thank you very much for that. And of course, before we begin, we'd like to convey our most thank you to our speakers and also to all delegates. Hence, we are conducting this event today through hybrid, and especially for those in particular different time zone with us. Thank you very much for your participation and also cooperation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready with our setup right here for the first session. And as we know, for the G20 International Standards Summit 2022, we do have 4 pillars of theme that will be brought up today in this summit. We begin with our first, and that is better health. Now, the objective of this session itself, where the path to global recovery will require collective cooperation that ensures equality of global health standards and closer collaboration to ensure future resilience. Health system needs to be inclusive, it needs to be equitable, and also responsive. Now, international standards in conjunction with conformity assessment can provide both the tools and also contribute the majority of policy objectives related to health. They offer solutions and also the full support spectrum of services from medical devices to health organization management, and in many countries provide the foundation for technical regulations. Based on global expertise and collaboration, the solution encompasses international consensus and best practices while ensuring safety, reliability, and also performance. Now, they enable the introduction of new technologies and help expand their availability to all parts of the world. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for this session, I would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, alongside with the panels of speaker for this session. We have Dr. Andalusia Rizka Andalusia, General Director of Pharmacy and Medical Devices from the Indonesian Ministry of Health. Also joining us, Mr. Scott Colburn, US FDA. Mr. Encik Ahmad Sharif, Chief Executive Officer, Medical Device Authority, Malaysia. Mr. Peter Williams, Executive Director, Healthcare Industry, Oracle JPAC. And Ms. Sean Yu, Vice Chairman, ITUT Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence for Health, FGAI4H, China Academy of Information and Communication Technology, CAICT. So ladies and gentlemen, let us begin and embark our first session for giving the time and also the platform for Dr. Andalusia Rizka Andalusia to share her keynote speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lucia Rizka Andalusia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Very good morning to all of the speaker and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate BSN for convening G20 International Standards Summit. I note the ISS is a high-level collaborative that involves the International Organization for Standardization, International Electrotechnical Commission, International Telecommunication Union, and is supported by World Trade Organization. Further, this year meeting of ISS is discussing the global health architecture. This theme is pertinent and part of our priority in Indonesian G20 presidency. Therefore, I thank you for the opportunity to share with you our perspective on the advanced transformative health infrastructure standards. Learning from pandemic handling, Ministry of Health is in progress to implement health system transformation plan for 2021 to 2024. This plan was built to ensure the accomplishment of national mandate for health development, which state in our national medium-term development plan, and to provide a stronger national health system to contribute on regional and global health development. As a focus on health system transformation consists of 6 pillars, and in this presentation, I will focus on health system resilience transformation pillar. It is the 3rd pillar. On the third pillar, we are on progress to transform our health system resilience. As lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is vital for Indonesia to build our system more resilient. This will be achieved by boosting the local production of medical devices. Next slide. In implementing the health system resilience transformation, there is a need to improving resilience of pharma and medical devices sector. This action needs the use of international standards into the aspect of national regulation. There are some aspects why the use of international standards become the need of and the urgency. The first is advantage and benefit because support societal and environmental policies, offer consumer protection, are used across different markets, reflect the state of the art, disseminate new technologies. And the second are to ensure that trade flows freely and support trade facilitation. And the use of international standards is in helping to achieve the implementation of technical barriers to trade, or we call it TBT. And the third are market economics, domestic manufacturing and services, a culture of competition, consumer protection with organized group, system for standards, quality, accreditation, metrology, a demand for harmonization, refers to the process of resolving disputes. Next slide. In this slide, I would like to give an example, the use of international standards in medical device sector. Indonesia medical device regulation based on global practices and international standards. There are 5 aspects that become the main concern. These are pre-market control, post-market control, the use of standard, clinical performance and safety, and quality management system. If we took a look at the standard, there are the common pattern use of medical devices, international standard, and it refers to the management and technical requires as ISO 17025, testing and calibration laboratories, and ISO 1471, risk management for medical devices, and ISO 134825, quality management system for medical devices. For ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy or performance of the medical devices, there are several international standards that should be referred. In example, IEC 60601 for safety of electrical, IEC 62366 for usability, and any specific standard from IEC and ISO, including software for medical devices, which refer to ISO 62309. Next slide. The controlling of medical device in Indonesia is done to ensure that the device is safety, quality, and have good performance when it is used by the user, and the final aim to ensure the patient safety. The controlling of medical device is conducted in pre-market before the device distributed, and in the post-market when the device is in the market according to the life cycle of the medical device. It means that the quality and safety must be ensured from the device is manufactured by manufacturer, then distributed by the distributor until the device has achieved its lifespan and need to be disposed. Manufacturer of medical device has to have business licensing and also implement the certified of good manufacturing practice for medical device. Distributor of medical device has to distribute license and also implement the certified of good distribution practice for medical device. And all the states of the medical device life cycle must be ensured that it will produce the safety and quality products. To ensure this regulation is needed to provide any information that must be new and implemented by the manufacturer and distributor, and also by user of medical devices. In addition, each of medical device before distributed in Indonesia must also have marketing license or product approval license. To get the marketing license, medical device must fulfill product standards. Indonesia has required that all medical device must fulfill standard of medical device, either national or international standards. Indonesia has national standard of medical device that known as SNI. It is now 294 SNI that identically adopted from international standard like ISO and IEC. The post-market controlling of medical market controlling of medical device, including supervision of production and distribution facilities, and post-market surveillance such as sampling and testing of product, and surveillance adverse event report and investigation and recalls and dispose. Indonesia has developed standards related to medical device that aim to improve product safety and quality and improve product competitiveness in national and international market. Examples include the Indonesian National Standard for Medical Device, as many as 298 standards. The standard development in Indonesia is in harmony with relevant international standard or adopting international standard, for example, International Organization for Standardization, International Electrotechnical Commission, and European Standard, and WHO Standard. Next slide. To achieve the mentioned, we have set policies that span through critical steps and achieving resilient state. We provide policy in research and development, facilitate clinical trial and technology transfer. We also provide policy in production, which is dedicated to improve the quality and capacity of our manufacturers. Special accelerated access or the red carpet is given to the local products. The government working closely with the local industry to facilitate and improve the implementation on related policies. Next slide. MOH has made various efforts in managing the pandemic COVID-19, one of which is through optimizing function of medical device testing laboratories, such as strengthening the COVID-19 testing laboratory network through optimization of national, regional, and private laboratories, as many as 242 laboratories to carry out COVID-19 examination, development of recording and reporting of COVID-19 examination system through new all-record application. Strengthening the post-market surveillance laboratory network by establishing 7 laboratories for testing RDT antigen COVID-19, validity and standard testing method. Preparing the regulation. Next slide. Learning from the efforts have been carried out testing laboratories, we need to support health resilience and fulfilling the availability of quality and innovative domestic medical device. It is necessary to strengthen medical device testing laboratory both in quality and quantity. The challenges is strengthening testing laboratories are the limitation of laboratory facilities and infrastructure, to the need to improve the competence of testing laboratories and fulfillment of standard requirements. The strategy that can be carried out through assessment of laboratory testing capacity, increasing the capacity of laboratory human resources, laboratory standardization through compliance the testing laboratory requirements, monitoring and evaluation of the laboratory in implementation of testing medical device in accordance with the standard. Next slide. Indonesia is in progress to develop a medical device testing laboratory utilizing existing agency called Health Facility Security Center by arranging its organization and function so that its capabilities can be optimized in testing medical devices to support the independence of domestic medical device and post-market surveillance. Next slide. The Minister of Health has also collaborated with to strengthen in vitro diagnostic medical device testing laboratories with WHO representative of Indonesia in order to create an IVD testing laboratory with international standard. In this case, starting with developing a WHO standardized testing laboratory for the lot testing for WHO pre-qualification preference, particularly for malaria RDT testing. This is my last slide. Thank you for the attention and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucia Rizkanda Lucia, General Director of Pharmacy and Medical Devices of Indonesian Ministry of Health. Thank you for sharing your presentation on a detailed look of the health standardization right here in Indonesia. We're going to come back to you, Dr. Lucia, but before that, we'd like to also introduce again our panelists of speakers. They'll be joining us for this session. We have Mr. Scott Colburn, Mr. Enchik Ahmad Sharif, Mr. Peter Williams, and Ms. Sean Yu. They'll be joining us, in which every speaker will have about 3 to 4 minutes introduction. So we'll begin with the farthest one. It is evening for him right now. So Mr. Scott Colburn, are you joining us right now?
Yes, I am, and good morning to you, and very late evening over here. Wish to thank all the organizers and hosts of the G20 Summit. It is a privilege to be able to come to you today. My name is Scott Colburn. I work for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Device and Radiological Health, and I'm the director of our Standards and Conformity Assessment Program. Our program works to lead the medical device community in the enhancement and use of consensus standards in the design, development, and evaluation of health technologies across their lifespan. And we work to solve problems and anticipate the opportunities to protect and promote public health through the use of high quality and regulatory ready standards. We are very proud of how we utilize standards here at the FDA and working with our national and international partners across all different stakeholders, which include academia, clinicians, our industry workers, and the thousands of industry companies we work with, and the dozens, if not hundreds, of regulators around the world that all have a common goal of patient safety in mind. At FDA, we utilize standards and get our involvements throughout the development process, but also in how we use them for our regulatory purposes and try to enhance standards to be a least burdensome and common tool to support their assessment of conformity in how we look at medical devices. Our use of standards alone isn't just to help get products into the market, but we also use them to help understand how products go through their total product life cycle, whether it's through its design and development, but also how its impact in public health missions, such as protecting patient safety. And so we want to work with all stakeholders to try to bring key data elements together. And digital health is one of those key areas that we think can help improve this. And so this type of action and what we're doing here today and sharing ways that we think we can enhance in what we do, not just in using standards and conformity assessment, but building alliances through organizations such as this and using other regional and international groups such as IMDRF and Global Harmonization working parties is a key element in making sure that all stakeholders are involved and are helping meet these novel and very important global goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Mr. Scott Colburn. And next up, we'd like to give this time for Mr. Ahmad Sharif, Chief Executive Officer, Medical Device Authority from Malaysia.
Hi, good morning and good evening to all. It is a privilege for me to be invited to this forum. So I'm Ahmad Sharif Hambali. I'm the Chief Executive of Medical Device Authority in Malaysia. So, which carry out the role and function to regulate medical devices in the Malaysian market. So, Medical Device Authority, or MDA in short, was established back in 2013 with a few key objectives. One of them is to ensure that medical devices placed in the market are safe and effective. Since medical devices encompass a very wide variety of products, we have to rely on the use of standards to ensure that they are being designed and manufactured to fulfill the principle of safety and performance. So in medical device industry is rapidly evolving and very highly regulated, with products ranging from as simple as gloves up to sophisticated machines such as CT scanner and implants. So standards are critical in allowing the introduction of new medical device technology while meeting public's and regulators' expectations. So I think these are some of my introduction for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Now I would like to allow this time for Mr. Peter Williams, Executive Director of Healthcare Industry of Oracle JPAC. The time is yours.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. It's much appreciated. I think the thing that is most important to me in this is that I currently chair the ISO task force on artificial intelligence in healthcare, and it's a very rapidly evolving space and important. In terms of the challenges, from a technology perspective, the two largest challenges are certainly interoperability and cybersecurity. And from a consumer perspective, it's really about trust and control. Those things have been a challenge for a long time in healthcare, but the rising power of more accessible high-performance computing, and especially cloud computing, is transforming the way that healthcare can be delivered, particularly in areas like genomics and artificial intelligence and virtual care. So those consumer and technology perspectives are intertwined. From a consumer perspective, having trust and control is about feeling confident that their information is secure and their privacy is being protected, that their data won't be used for a purpose they haven't consented to, the idea of nothing is done about me without me. And importantly, that the information is accurate and can be relied upon for their care. Clearly, effective cybersecurity and interoperability are essential to achieve that. And it has to be an appropriate level of interoperability. And by that, I mean not just interconnectedness between systems, but exchanging information that is both meaningful and contextual to the recipient. So while there are challenges, with the right level of international cooperation and focus, we can create that safe, trusted, interconnected ecosystem that we're all looking for. I think a good international example is the work that's been done on the International Patient Summary, which brought together very quickly, with impetus going all the way up to the G7, a solution that's being progressed with collaboration from multiple standards groups, including ISO, the HL7 Fire Community, SNOMED, IHE, and GS1. A more localised example is how a city council in the UK had to pivot its service model during the early days of the pandemic because of a shortage of nursing staff. They put in place a system that called people at home on their phone using a multi-language digital assistant. People didn't need an app, they just spoke when they answered the phone. The system analysed their response using artificial intelligence, populated the central dashboard with recommendations for nursing staff who then acted on that. The impact of all that was they reduced the nurse demand by 30%, saw a large rise in consumer satisfaction with better targeted services. And that technology could do 10,000 calls a minute and is obviously highly effective. But the key is for that sort of innovation to have widespread adoption, it'll be critically dependent for consumer confidence that there are appropriate standards and safeguards in place.
All right, thank you very much to Mr. Peter Williams. And last but not least, we have Ms. Sean Yu as the Vice Chairman, ITUT Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence for Health from China Academy of Information and Communication Technology.
Thank you. So many thanks for having me in such an important event and discussion. I'm Shan Xu from China Academy of Information and Telecommunication Technology. I'm also the Vice Chair of ITU and WHO AI for Health Focus Group, and also the head of WHO Collaborating Center for Digital Health. So I know that today we are going to talk about standardizations for better health. So based on that topic, I would like to briefly share two slides from my experience when doing standardizations on digital health. So one perspective is that from what we have done in China. So as you can see in this chart, my institution, CRACT, is committed to build the digital health ecosystem to facilitate the industry development. We act as an important bridge between the policymakers and also the industry by three kinds of actions. One is the top level, the policy support. The second is the middle layer, the industry alliance. The third is that we are doing standard settings and also evaluation. So this forms a loop that we would like to turn standards as a role to turning policy into concrete actions, to implementations related to health. So that means a lot of coordination works needed in this process, but it is the key to this ecosystem. So another perspective is that when I work for the ITU and WHO AI for Health focus group, so the key takeaways here is still a cross-sector collaboration. So as you can see, we hold meetings for over 16 times in different continents. And we work very close with different kinds of members. And for example, members from research, healthcare, and regulations, and also ICT experts. How we organize or coordinate this kinds of group is that we're working in what I have showed in this picture as a matrix. So as you can see, the horizontal ones are general specifications that, for example, you consider the regulations, evaluations, data buyers, or how you train your model. And then the vertical ones is the specific health domains. For example, how you use AI to predict an elderly forms or some an eye disease, skin disease, etc. So in this way, I would like to emphasize that when we are doing standards, it is important to consider how you promote it, how you use it, how you socialize it, and also to working together, especially with an ICT and health experts from different kinds of group or multiple stakeholders. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Ms. Shanshu for your presentations and also for the introduction by all speakers for the session. Now we are going for a round of questions before we are giving the time for our delegates, either in person or also virtually, to ask their questions. And we'd like to thank you to our speakers. But before that, we'd like to give information that Dr. Lucia Rizkanda Lucia, because of other agendas, that she cannot attend for our round of questions and also Q&A session. And we'd like to thank you for her participation as our keynote speaker for the first session of our G20 International Standards Summit 2022. With that said, we're going to go straight to our speakers right now and to our panelists of speakers. If you have any other responses, if this question was not directed to you, you may do so, raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself, and then you can also give your responses to this. So we'll begin with our first round of question, and that is in the terms of using standards to support regulation. To Ms. Sue, how is, do you think, vital the role of standards in digital health, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think standards is very important. It is a kind of consent between multiple stakeholders. So that is why we work together with the ministries of ICTs, ministries, health commissions of health, national commissions of health, and also learn from how the engineers, they develop the AI algorithms, and also try to control the buyers when you develop design, and also you registered, you licensed, and also the post market of your health AI-based medical device. So it is a kind of discussions or consents between multiple stakeholders, and this kind of discussion process itself has their significance in developing the industry sustainable development. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Xu. And you already ensure how very vital and how important is the standards in digital health, especially the collaboration between stakeholders and also private sectors. And with that said, then we're going to go to Mr. Scott Colburn. How do standards then help or hinder the implementation of health objectives then? Mr. Colburn?
Yeah, thank you. The use of standards enhances regulatory science and promotes a least burdensome approach to device oversight, which is a key goal for FDA. Standards introduce efficiencies into pre-market review processes by setting clear expectations for conformity assessment and test reporting. Using declarations of conformity and quality conformity assessment reports can increase predictability, streamline pre-market review, provide clear regulatory expectations, and facilitate market entry. Second, consensus standards promote quality. Crowdsourcing standards leads to a clear performance expectations. Relying upon input from around the world ensures that we tap into expertise that no one manufacturer, regulator, or clinician will have access to. Robust standards development yields standards that can keep up with technological advancements, which is so critical in our industry. And finally, using standards helps ensure that innovative, safe, and effective devices and health technologies are available. And by optimizing that bench to bedside time, we get life-saving products to the patients we all serve. We work on this through our means at FDA by recognizing standards and allowing their use to be a voluntary means, but we find that they are used as a means to really communicate to regulators and are seen as a primary mechanism to lower burden in getting into the regulatory processes and making sure they can get into the market in the most efficient time possible. We see use of standards as such an enormously important tool that we share this approach with regulators from around the world in our activities with the IMDRF, the Global Harmonization Working Party, and in how we engage in standards development. We sit in over 600 different committees and working groups across over 36 standard developing organizations because we see how that value lowers our burden in what we do and helps us keep up with trying to help drive safer technologies for the patients that we serve.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Now, from what you've said before, that it really enhances the value of regulators with standards itself. Now, my next question is to Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Then, how can regulators leverage these standards? And with that said, what are the benefits that standards bring to our regulators or to the regulators itself, Mr. Sharif?
Yeah. Standards are basically voluntary. So in order to make it as a mandatory requirements, the government, regulators are adopting the standards as a requirement to comply, to show that a medical device is safe and perform as intended. As we know, the hierarchy of standards can be from international to local standards and then to industrial standard. And the highest hierarchy is the international standard. So by adapting the standards for in our regulations, it will help to remove the trade barriers, to support regulatory convergence at the international level, and avoid the emergence of protectionist measures. So it will help the regulators to conduct conformity assessment to ensure that the medical devices are safe and perform as intended. And then by using international standards, it will help remove trade barriers and easy access of the medical devices by in the global market.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif. Again, it was said before by Mr. Colburn that standards itself will give not only value but also confidence by the consumers and civil society itself. Now, back to you, Mr. Colburn. In your introduction, you were saying that standards to harmonize regulations and promote a least burdensome approach. Can you share with us any case examples on this?
Yes, there's a number of real core examples that we look at, and one is even just utilizing one of our basic principle standards in ISO 1345, which is the quality system in the medical device area. This is a standard that's widely used around the world, and our own quality system regulation was written in parallel to this area. We are actually transitioning from our official rule that has been in there for many years to looking at adopting this ISO standard because it aligns so closely to how we do our work today. And in fact, it also will help us work in the international harmonization. The principle underneath that standard is how we assess risk as a public health agency, and looking at how risk and harm and aspects can be mitigated through thoughtful standards development in the use of ISO 14971, as mentioned earlier in our keynote, is one of those bedrock principles that helps to communicate across all the different areas that standards rely heavily upon risk mitigation tactics to be able to communicate to regulators how their devices are safe and effective. There are many areas in it that we utilize standards. As I mentioned earlier, we are involved in hundreds and hundreds of standards committees, and we have a recognition program that it communicates to our stakeholders what types of standards do we feel meet the needs that we have for where we have oversight and pre-market review. And those are tools that allow the communication from the testing houses and conformity assessment bodies when they work with their manufacturers to demonstrate to the regulatory authority on how they are meeting the basic principles that we are looking for in safety and effectiveness. Internationally, we have worked with organizations like the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, who has developed the essential principles of safety and performance, and it outlines the high-level principles that deal with what we care about globally as regulators in assessing the safety and performance of devices, and points to how standards can fit in to meet certain of the essential principles that are outlined in that document. And this is one of the drivers that we're trying to do as a participant in standards, to try to map standards to meet those high-level essential principles in hopes of being able to drive more regulatory convergence from a global setting.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Colburn, on that. And what we do need is cross-sectoral collaboration for us, especially for the international standardization in the health department itself. Now, with that said, we'd like to go to Mr. Peter Williams then. Health standards, Mr. Williams, how different than it is than general standards? And are there areas for synergy, such as the use of AI?
Yeah, look, I think the more important question is not how they differ, but whether they should. One of the decisions made by the ISO task force on standards for AI was that our starting point is always, is health different? Is there actually a need for a new standard? And this is important for two reasons. Fundamentally, as a number of people have referenced before, modern healthcare operates as part of a very broad ecosystem that has close interaction not only with a very wide range of human and social services, but also with even broader aspects such as climatic conditions. So creating different standards unnecessarily is only going to create barriers to progress. Secondly, and probably more pragmatically, given the pace of development and the use of AI in healthcare, there's a need for speed to market with standards. So we don't want to be wasting time on revisiting foundational concepts that have already been looked at in depth, and we want to ensure that our focus is on the areas of greatest need. Even with this approach, there is a risk that as more specialised standards are being developed, say at the application level, they may identify gaps in some of those foundational or common concepts. That risk is certainly understood, and we have been looking at processes to manage such issues, for example, including interim requirements in annexures rather than the body of standards, so there's the opportunity to revise. A really important development at the macro level is that there's been agreement to form a joint working group between the ISO TC 215 task force and the ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee SC42, which is the Committee on Artificial Intelligence, looking at this more broadly. And I think that will help that alignment between the horizontal and vertical requirement.
Thank you very much, Mr. William. Now, back to you, Ms. Xu. Cross-sector collaboration is needed in standardization. Then how we bridge the gap between health and ICT at both the global and also national levels then?
Thank you for the question. I think I have put some of our experience in my slides. I think from the national perspective, it is important to form the consensus between different kinds of the policymakers. For example, in some also for countries, there is a Ministry for ICTs and the Ministry for Health. And during this standardization, during this digitalization areas, it is important to acknowledge the potential of ICTs or digital technologies that they can improve healthcare delivery or promote the universal health coverage. So to recognize that kinds of value, it is important, and then it forms the motivation to build the partnership between different kinds of multiple stakeholders, for example, from ICTs and then to health. If we do not share the same value or burning point, sometimes you will find different partners, they actually talking sometimes like talking different kinds of language, they can't communicate. So based on that perspective, so I think the kind of sharing value and the blueprint, it is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xu. Our next round of questions in cooperation at the international level, and I think this is Mr. Peter Williams' forte, as you are involved in the International Medical Device Forum, IMDF. How are the regulators working together with the standardization community? If you can share with us, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, look, one of the reasons for an increasing focus on engagement by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum with standards bodies has been the growing focus by the IMDRF on software as a medical device, on software in a medical device, and digital therapeutics. And in particular, the use by those technologies of artificial intelligence. And, you know, that's a substantial challenge for governments, with hundreds of thousands of healthcare apps, you know, now available globally. So the IMDRF has been working very closely with the standards bodies and industry. At the recent International Forum held in Australia in September, there were presentations from many national delegations, industry bodies, and standards organisations, including the ISO TC 215 task force. One of the largest challenges for standards organisation is how to develop new standards in a timely way, given the need for international consensus that was just referred to. A specific request of Task Force 5 is to work on the development of a management system standard for organisations involved in certifying their AI application lifestyle and supply chain to foster good practices, safe and effective products, and to support regulators. That's going to be a significant piece of work, and there's likely be a need to establish some lower level consensus documents to provide interim guidance in the meantime. And I think it's incumbent on us to look at ways of working that will accelerate the understanding of both regulators and standard bodies and that collaboration between them in dealing with such a rapidly evolving space as artificial intelligence in particular.
Then in your opinion, Mr. William, how can regulators work together efficiently on international level to support the global health initiatives? We're still with you, Mr. Williams, on this.
Well, I think some of the things that I've already referred to in terms of the collaboration that is happening across all of the standards bodies in particular, and the recognition of the interrelationship between the activities of the device manufacturers, the software developers, and government is probably at its most prominent that's been for some time. And I noticed that Scott has his hand up. You might want to comment on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you. I really appreciate what Peter is bringing up about organizations like IMDRF and also with GHWP, who recently made strong efforts to engage with the international standards organizations and are creating liaisonship roles through the opportunities that are outlined in the ISO-IC directives, for example. The key aspect of what we're trying to do here is twofold. One is to try to coordinate a global regulatory voice that would help drive global purposes based upon common thinking tactics across broad areas of the economy that are engaged in this type of activity. But just as important, and maybe even more important, we're really trying to get individual regulatory bodies to be able to participate in their national bodies and national committees, because it's so critical for them to communicate to their country's standard developing organizations. So that way, at the international table, where resources are typically thin for certain bodies, especially regulators, where they may not be able to be present, their vote and communication through their national bodies and committees will be present through that activity and can be carried through by the experts that sit at that table. This is something that we think is just as strong as developing that global voice through the IMDRF liaison program, because then we're ensuring that we're working through the national bodies and in understanding where there could be potential differences in how a standard would impact other types of regulations, and where we can work to truly globalize the approach to get that one test worldwide approach answer that we've always been seeking for in how we use standards.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Is there any responses from other speakers in regards to the regulators working together or collaborating at international level? Mr. Sharif, Ms. Ju? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I just would like to echo Mr. Peter and Scott have said, and I totally agree with that. Regulators should sit on the table and to talk about the international standardizations. And I would like to add to ask attention from the ITU, a new work item that is based on the AI and machine learning based on decision-making assistant software as a medical device. So it is another kind of collaboration between China national regulators and the ITU, and we are working on that kind of standards to deal with kinds of bias or risk management when developers design the AI and machine learning based for health or clinicals, especially how you manage the risk management during the total life cycle of the AI algorithm. And it is now closely worked with ITU. And I would like to echo what Peter and Scott has said. I think probably this kind of global standardization bodies can work as a vendor or to gather different kinds of a voice from the national regulators, and then we sit on the table of the, for example, the IMDRF working mechanisms, and to generate some experience sharings or generate knowledge that can be set in as a tangible development that can benefit the global industry. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xu. And just like what we're having today with the summit itself, hopefully, through the discussion that we have, there are some initiatives and also finding a solution that we can implement to the call to action itself. Now, head to you, Mr. Sharif, on adopting testing and certification. On this round, how do we move beyond standards then to ensure testing and then following to certification, Mr. Sharif?
Oh, okay. In WHO has published new guidance on good reliance practice, which provides guidance and recommendations for agile medical device regulations. So the purpose of this guidance is to promote a more efficient approach to regulation, thereby improving access to quality assured, effective and safe medical products. And in the documents, it is recommended that the degree of reliance via this good reliance practice include the standardization process, work sharing, a bridge process, regional reliance mechanism, unilateral, and as well as mutual recognition. So for example, for the regulatory reliance, such as a bridge process for conformity assessment via testing and certification, where an applicant or the industry who is applying for registration or market access of their devices, they only required to undergo verification process. This is especially for Malaysia. So we recognize the conformity assessment that have been done by countries like US, Japan, Australia, Canada, and also EU. This has reduced redundant procedure and time consuming as well as fast patient access. The reason of adopting this kind of verification process is we think that everything have already been done by the recognized regulators, and by doing that we have reduced a lot of redundant procedures that we need to redo the conformity assessment again.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif. And in regards on conformity assessment, I think this is also one of your forte, Mr. Colburn. Can you share with us your experience with this assessment, and how do we bring conformity assessments into regulation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really a very broad area too. FDA has, a long-standing history of relying on standards, and through a manufacturer's self-declaration of conformity, that attestation has been utilized to help us then have that communication of how they've gone about in utilizing standards. But over the years, we have also learned to appreciate the conformity assessment system that exists, and how accreditation bodies work with conformity assessment bodies that do certification and testing that was mentioned earlier, to ISO IC 17025 and ISO 15189, which are critical components for regulators to understand. Because behind the backdrop of conformity assessment, for regulators to truly accept it and want to adopt it and begin sharing the ability to utilize that one test worldwide approach, is to have confidence in the competence of testing. And that requires us to understand what goes into an accreditation of a testing laboratory. What are those specifications that are utilized for standards like the 60601 series and IEC, which has a massive component in their IEC-EE with the CB scheme and several other areas, but it is a vastly broad standard that requires a lot of different areas of expertise in order to assess competence of a lab. Similarly, like in areas of biocompatibility, where the needs for toxicologists and to be able to assess how laboratories do this kind of work is important to regulators, so that way they can feel confident that the test reports that they're receiving are of the highest quality, and allow the manufacturer to be able to demonstrate that conformity to the standards that they're using to demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of a medical product. It's also critical for us to understand how testing laboratories and manufacturers work together in developing their test plan, into ensuring that they actually understand how to utilize that standard as designed, and how we have been trying to communicate it as regulators in the intent to help demonstrate that safety and effectiveness aspects, those key principles of safety and performance of a medical device. Building that all together, I believe, requires regulators to get engaged a little bit more with the conformity assessment system and help us communicate. We've begun doing that as a pilot at FDA under our accreditation scheme for conformity assessment. And it has opened up great doors for us to appreciate both the rigor as well as the areas for possible improvement to help drive harmonization and reduce the burden that regulatory processes can bring. But I do believe that there is an answer in us getting more involved to help reduce those burdens for us and to help bring products into the market quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. I see that Ms. Chu is actually very engaging with your answer. Any responses for you in regards to this matter, Ms. Chu?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So I just have the same feeling with Mr. Scott Colburn, because we are also working on how to facilitate the manufacturing to fasten the process of to go to market, and we are also thinking to develop some standards that help them to quality assessment when doing their AI-based software as a medical device. And we are trying, there's some experience from our efforts that we are trying to launch an innovation. Actually, we have already launched an innovation challenge for this kind of product. And then we, during that kind of evaluation or scoring, then we select the topper performance and to facilitate to accelerate their process. And this is point one. And then point two is that we engage that kinds of private sectors to develop or to collect their suggestions on this kinds of process, especially the post-market process, the monitoring and the evaluation. What kind of metrics should be monitored and to ensure the safety and reliance. So I think that is a very interesting and important field. Probably it's not that mature, but it worth us to work together and explore a bit to help the sustainable development of this industry. Over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xu, for your answer. Now we're moving on towards sustainability on this health sector, and that's why we're going to head over to Mr. Sharif. Of course, as we envision more circular economies, can we then consider the use of refurbished medical equipment, and how can we standard promote of their safety? What's your take on this, Mr. Sharif?
Okay. I think the first thing that we should understand that on the definition of refurbished medical device. Refurbished medical device means a medical device of which the whole or any part thereof has been rebuilt. Whether or not using parts, one or more used medical devices of that same kind, so as to create a medical device that can be used for the purpose originally intended by the product owner, and which may have had the following work carried out on it. First, stripping into component parts or sub-assemblies. Second, checking their suitability for reuse. Third, replacement of components or sub-assemblies that are not suitable for reuse. Fourth, assembly of the reclaimed and or replacement of component or sub-assemblies. Fifth, testing of the assembled device against either original or revised release criteria. And the sixth, identifying an assembled medical device as a refurbished medical device. Yes, I think we can consider the use of refurbished equipment with certain conditions. The first condition is the refurbishment activities shall be included in the scope of the quality management system of the production of the medical device. And then the refurbishment activities shall comply with good refurbishment practice of medical device, or GRPMD, which set a standard operating procedure and dedicated quality requirements that ensure refurbished medical device is safe and effective as when it was new. And the third condition is the medical device shall undergo conformity assessment again. And then fourth, the technical details for the refurbished medical device shall be provided, and the medical device, the refurbished medical device shall be indicated. For example, like it is a refurbished. In terms of safety, basic requirement for refurbished medical device is to have the quality management system, QMS ISO 13485, and risk management standard ISO 14971. Then the medical device shall be refurbished according to GRPMD, which is intended to meet its original quality, performance, and safety standards based on ISO 13485. And then safety performance must be evaluated according to the essential principle of safety and performance for a specific refurbished medical device. And they should establish maintenance of a refurbished medical device. For example, in Malaysia, we have the standards for the maintenance of medical device, that is the MS 2058 Code of Practice for good engineering maintenance management of active medical devices. Okay.
Thank you then, Mr. Sharif, and hopefully with this, considering refurbished medical equipment can be proceeded, because we know, especially during the pandemic itself, medical waste has been the majority waste in our planet. Hence, that's why if we can regulate the standardization on this refurbished medical equipment, it could really do help the environment itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our speakers. You know, it was a great and very enlightening discussion that we had, but now we're going to ask our delegates that's right here in person in Bali, and also that is joining us virtually. If you have any further questions to our panel of speakers, please do raise your hand if you're right here. Yes, sir. And also virtually, please do put your questions on the column chat. Yes, so can you please stand up, sir? And oh, then you can sit down. Sorry. Yes, just mention your name and also the questions.
My name is Ferdy Beer from the Netherlands. I'm a member of the Royal Netherlands Economic Mission during March the 9th, 2020. And now I'm still here in Indonesia to help the locals here in Indonesia with Indonesia Maju, Indonesia Onward. My question is, this is a question from a volunteer, a Dutch online volunteer, Christian volunteer in Indonesia, in the Indonesian local community, who loves the Pancasila, which is rule number 1 very, very much. And the question is, the Indonesian President Joko Widodo and Vice President Maruf Amin want to introduce the world with Indonesian Islamic halal products. For example, cosmetics and high-tech products like your G5 refrigerator in the future, or medical high-tech products. So what is the role of fair trade and sustainable international standards certificates and the halal certificate here in Indonesia and soon worldwide? I hope you can give a clear answer on behalf of Indonesia Onward, Indonesia Maju, as Menteri, Minister, or the boss here of this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question, and regardless, thank you very much for standing up for that. We wish that Dr. Lucia is here to actually really answer the questions, and it was such a great question too. But regards in halal certifications and whatnot, maybe Mr. Sharif, as we have the somewhat similar governance, maybe you can help to answer the question.
In Malaysia, yes, we have halal certification for medical device, but it is voluntary in nature. So to register a medical device in Malaysia, you need to comply with the requirements of our medical device regulations. But halal is another step that you have to undergo. That is you have to undergo the halal certification, but it is voluntary. It is not a mandatory. Any manufacturers or any owners of a medical device who have got their certification that have got their product, their medical device registered with MDA, with Medical Device Authority of Malaysia, they can market their product anywhere in Malaysia. But for halal certification, I think their aim is more for those people who really require the halal, require the product to be halal, to be inserted or to be used on them. So these are the only, I think they are going to that kind of consumers. But in general, it is not a mandatory requirement, it is just voluntary. So if you want to opt for halal certification, you can do that. But if you don't need that halal certification, you still can market your product in Malaysia freely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shari, for highlighting how the certification is in Malaysia. And also this question is very in regards to the regulation here in Indonesia. With that said, we would like to also ask the help to answer with Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, our chairman of BSN, to answer this question. Thank you very much, sir.
I'm here. Thank you very much for the question. So thank you, moderator. So actually the one which has to answer your question is the Agency for Halal Product Assurance within Ministry of Religion Affairs here. But in the fact that we are working hand in hand with them to make the halal certification scheme in Indonesia is running. So starting in the year of 2014, halal has now become mandatory in Indonesia through the law number 33, the year 2014. And it used to be only one halal certification body that been granted to certify halal. But since the establishment of the new law, so the law mandated to us to give to any of, I would say something like halal certification body, which is accredited by our Ministry of Religion Affairs through the Agency for Halal Product Assurance. And if we talk about the requirements of the standard, so I think the requirements for the competence of the certification body itself, we are using the ISO standard, Mr. Sergio. So ISO IC 17065, if you are familiar with. And also for the halal requirement itself, we are using now the technical requirements, which is published by the Ministry of Religion Affairs. But currently we are in discussion with them, because in the future the requirements hopefully will be adopted as SNI or Indonesian National Standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, and hopefully that would elaborate more on your answer, sir. Now we have time for one more question, maybe from virtually, if I can check if there is any question coming in, or maybe also from the speakers. Is there any other responses to one of the questions here? Not yet. All right. Do you have any more questions from the floor? All right, we'll be waiting for another more minutes for delegates, probably from virtually. We're going to give them also the time for them to ask questions. Maybe this is also to our speakers in regards to health sectors. We know that, especially in developing countries, you've already mentioned a lot of health initiatives and collaborations, especially with technologies. But there are many countries, especially developing countries, where parts of the rural areas in their country, they can't even get any health benefits or health help. So how can our initiative, especially in technologies and maybe in the help of AI, could really made everything just seamlessly put together for health services and also health sectors to be consumed by all the civil society, especially in developing countries. Maybe we can have Mr. Peter Williams on this first.
Yes, look, one of the things, as I mentioned, I work with Oracle. One of the areas where We did work with the vaccine solution, working with the Tony Blair Institute, was in Senegal and Rwanda. In both those cases, they had large areas of the country that, in fact, had no access to the internet or no capability for doing that. And for us to be able to deploy the vaccine solution, which fundamentally relied on technology, we had to build an edge computing solution, which we could do, and that could be done remotely and then reconnected. Probably the largest challenge in that was making sure that in doing that, we didn't breach the requirements around privacy and security, because we were actually then having a device which you wouldn't traditionally hold personally identifiable information on. So I do think, you know, one of the challenges, and certainly in ISO, in all of the standards developments, one of the focus is on developing in mid-level economies and making sure that the solutions that we come up with are applicable across, you know, all of those environments, and not just focused on, I guess, the high-tech end of the solution, but you know, have the widest possible practical applicability.
Correct. Health access and health availability, and if we can enhance that, you know, ensure that we are still right now in the pandemic, and if we can have that, I think we can really recover together and recover stronger, as our theme of the G20 presidency itself. Can we have your take on this, Mr. Colburn?
Yes, I would like to break this down in a very simple fashion, and I think this could be a call to action to our leadership at ISO, ICITU, and all the members here in the G20 that, you know, participation, as I mentioned earlier, is very critical, but we know that resources can be very, very, very thin. Also, communicating to the technical committees and the leadership that manage those committees on areas that we could do to improve this would help drive experts that are specifically trying to address areas in these technical areas and make those connections, and maybe even bring themselves to be able to hold meetings in the areas where these people could participate in person better. Being involved is such a critical aspect to be able to understand how to take standards and build them into that conformity assessment model that can bring technologies to the market in their area in the most efficient, least burdensome, and cost-effective ways possible. And participation is always that sore spot that we find, but there are ways now, especially in the ability for me to call you from Washington, D.C. and be in Bali tonight or in your morning. There are ways that we can do this in more economical ways. And so that is such a powerful message on all stakeholders to get involved in ways. And I think the leadership that we have in our international standards groups can work with the leaderships that are appointed in each of those technical committees. And I've seen examples of this in the past, like in areas for devices for injectables and ISO TC84, where they have coordinated to bring in leadership from Africa, for example, who had an identified need to bring devices to help supply their nations in that area. And we had great outcomes and ended up developing better standards that met the needs that could be done in broader areas. So key message is find ways to get people to participate.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you for that energy right there, Mr. Colburn. Now, because we are very limited in time of this first session, we have other sessions that we have to undergo. Maybe to our speakers, last remarks on this, and we start from Ms. Shin Yu.
Thank you. I just would like add a short comments on your previous question. So regarding to the developing areas or countries, sometimes we think AI is a very high-tech thing. We think they are very complicated, but from our experience, AI has a great potential to help the rural poor areas, because AI can learn from the top performance and expertise, and then they use their technologies or knowledge to help to deploy it in the rural area. That is point one. But point two is that I would like to call the conscious when you use AI, because if you only learn from the top areas, they will have data bias or model bias. So when you deploy it in the rural area, be cautious about that bias. That is point two. And point three is that regarding to the buyers and the ITU and WHO AI for Health focus group, that we are going to committed to build a benchmark system that to deal with that kind of buyers, model buyers or data buyers. So we would like to set it as a baseline to evaluate if that kinds of AI models can work safely or in a required way, in a reliable way. So that is our efforts regarding to what you have mentioned, the rural area or developing countries. Over.
Yes. Thank you very much on that, Mr. Shansu, and hopefully you will have, we'll have a collaboration not only between governments but also private sectors and stakeholders itself on your initiative on that. Again, maybe a last remarks before we conclude our first session, Ms. Shansu.
Yeah, I think I just would like to thank you for inviting me in that a great discussion or panel, and I'm looking forward to more collaboration. That is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shansu, Ms. Shansu, excuse me. And now to Mr. Ahmad Sharif, your last remark for the session.
I think capacity building and work sharing at the international level is very crucial in this to address any requirements to develop any standards on medical devices, be it the traditional medical devices or the current emerging medical technologies. So I think the regulators as well as the users and the stakeholders for medical devices need to be exposed, they need to be, their capacity need to be built so that everybody understand the safety and performance standard and use the medical device according to what it is intended for. Okay, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this panelists in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Now to Mr. Peter Williams, your last remarks, sir.
Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to participate. I'd just really like to reinforce the comments that Scott made regarding participation from lower and middle income economies in this. I think it's really an important aspect in making sure that not only that our systems are applicable more widely, but also that we tap into the innovation that is in many cases coming from those communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Williams. And last but never the least, Mr. Scott Colburn.
I couldn't probably say it better than all the members of the esteemed panel, but I want to thank Indonesia as the host and all the leadership there. As everyone mentioned, and I think as you can see, no matter where we come from or who we represent, we have a common goal in trying to develop stronger standards to improve the health of our public and and patients and drive technologies. And I think when we work in better standards development and see how they can be incorporated by regulators and then use a very strong conformity assessment system, when we all come together as stakeholders to that, we can bring data that can measure the impact of standards. And that's a key aspect, I think, for us to continue to improve standards, to measure the outcomes that we're trying to do in this ever-driving technological industry. But if we want to keep building confidence, that data and how it measures the impact will help drive the next generation of standards and the continual improvements that we'll have together and be able to accomplish these goals. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to continue to working with all of our colleagues and friends in the standards world. And I wish you all a good day and evening and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colburn. What a great to end the note for the first session of the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. Can we have a round of applause, please, for our speakers? We'd like to thank you, Mr. Scott Colburn, Mr. Ahmad Sharif, Mr. Peter Williams, and Ms. Shansu from and Dr. Andalusia Rizka Andalusia as our keynote speaker for our first session. And again, if you have, or we're going to compile any questions, if you have further questions in regards of health sector and the standard, and for the standardization, we'll compile your questions and then we'll give your question respectively to the speakers.